Any apologies? Okay. Minutes, pages 5 to 8. Does anyone have any comments on the accuracy of minutes? I wonder if we perhaps could, after this meeting, revert to the slightly older system of the the more comprehensive minutes, because the new minutes, I understand the need for brevity, but it's largely a list of questions that members asked, opposed to the byplay between members and officers. And
I can take that back to...
if you could, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone have any comments about the accuracy? Councillor Redstone?
Yeah, not the accuracy.
Microphone.
Really, the same
Microphone.
What you were saying.
Microphone.
That we need...
Microphone.
Sorry, shout at me. Okay. We have to... I worry that we're not being... I know we're down in the minutes, as it being said, but I think sometimes, because this is out to general public, they don't know what we say. So I think we've got a couple of bits, or one thing I said, but there's not enough down there for... it needs to be... We need to be named as saying things, you know. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, sign those off quite happily. Urgent items. I'm not agreed to the consideration of any urgent items. Declaration of interests. Very good.
James, sorry.
Only because Blackshots is on there. Just the norm, thank you.
Yep. Councillor Spate.
Sorry, I just wish to make a statement about access to the meeting.
Sure.
Are you happy for me to say it under urgent business?
I am.
Okay.
Can you put your microphone on, Councillor Spate?
I'm copying Joy, you see. This is an old complaint from members of several committees, and I'm just going to re-emphasise it because I know that this committee, which is a really important committee, they're all important, we are here to be seen by the public. The public have access. Now, we all know that we're not getting a great attendance at meetings. Yet again, I arrived at this building prior to the meeting. The front door was shut. There was a security guard out the way. There's a sign on the door saying back in 5 minutes. This is just not acceptable. This building was built as a showcase for this borough. It was meant to be open to the public. It was meant to welcome them in to share in the business of democracy. And we're shutting the door on the public and not making them welcome. And it keeps getting said time and time and time again. And I know a lot of other councillors are getting annoyed about it. You know, we're paying a security guard to be down there, so there's no reason why all the lights can't be on, why the door can't be open, and why the public can come in without having to be checked, double-checked, and sign in, which I don't think is a legal requirement. And I'm getting sick to the back teeth of saying the same administrative things. Thank you for your indulgence.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Spate. I think Councillor Redstone will bear out. We had the officers responsible for the interim improvement plan come to Conservative Group about a month ago, and the issues of accessibility to the building, security were the issues that were discussed. And you're right, it's the administration of the buildings, these low-level, background, seemingly unimportant issues. These are the issues that keep cropping up. And I think, as I said in full council a month or so ago, if you don't deal with the small issues, no one's going to have confidence you can fix the big issues. Councillor Redstone?
Yeah, just to come back on what Neil said, I took the trouble to go and talk to the security staff, and they say there is something wrong with the doors. They don't do what they're supposed to do. So they're not opening when they're supposed to and closing. There's something wrong there. So whether people are not talking to the security, 'cause it's them that use it all the time, so they must know what's happening. So I think that, you know, we need to speak to those people who sit on front line and know what's going on. So they're just not working properly. They've told people, obviously no one's listening.
Okay, I'm not necessarily sure it's an issue with the doors, because I know there were certainly frequent issues when I was mayor with the accessibility, but I'm sure we can take that up. Item 5, the Housing Complaints Process Regulation, Business Intelligence and Performance Report. Chris, I think because we've got quite a few papers tonight, if officers introduce as briefly as possible, so we can dive straight into questions. And plus, because Ryan's got so many reports, I want to see if we can see how frazzled we can make him in quick succession. So, Evelina?
Chair, if I might just quickly introduce the report. Thank you. And Chair, I might have missed it, but we have had apologies from Sue Hodgson, the tenant representative, I believe she's emailed direct to the generic inbox, and I forwarded to yourself as well. So just wanted to make it noted that she has sent her apologies. So this report today obviously is an important one for us. We take every single complaint as a vital piece of information and look to engage with residents to see what went wrong and how to put things right quickly and efficiently for them. Obviously, Chris will deliver the main body of the report, but I have also brought with me key colleagues from within the department, as well as our main contractor, because as you will go into the detail, this is where the higher number is around the repair service. So please use this opportunity to ask them questions. I do appreciate that you had the opportunity to ask them questions around damp and mould, but this is slightly different. This is around the overall performance on complaints. So I'm really grateful as well for support that mayors are providing to us. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So my report on housing complaints process, regulation, business performance and business intelligence and performance is comprised of 3 main sections. So the first main section is section 3. That's all about the complaints process. So we've got information there on what the process is and how we handle complaints internally through our 2-stage process, including information on who investigates the complaints, timescales for responding to complaints and the process for escalation. We've also got details of the way both ombudsmen, both the housing and local government and social care ombudsmen, investigate complaints which escalate there. Section 4 is about learning from complaints, so that contains detail on how the housing service learns from complaints in general, how we utilise learning action plans, which are key to ensuring failings don't reoccur in the future, and also provides an example of a learning action plan for a specific complaint. It also details how learning action plans feed through into service commitments each financial year. And the aim of those service commitments is, again, to prevent common complaint themes from reoccurring. Section 5's on effective complaints handling TSMs. So, Brian, I'm sure we'll touch on this a little bit further later. So the regulator of social housing has created a new system of assessing how well social landlords are performing. One part of that system is the TSM suite, which we will be reporting to the regulator next year. Part of that TSM suite comprises a suite of TSMs relating to effective complaints handling, and the section of the report contains details of what they are, how they're calculated, and when we'll be reporting that detail to the regulator. Section 6 is all about Power BI and complaints, so it provides the extent of the BI relating to complaints which we've got available to us. We've provided some dashboard examples, and the section contains details on where the data comes from, how often it's updated, the granularity of that data, and how that BI is being utilised within the service to understand complaints better and to understand trends. Section 7 is on statistics and performance for 2022-23, mainly in comparison with 2021-22, and that provides an overview of metrics on complaints relating to complaints received, complaint outcomes, and timeliness of complaints. And lastly, Section 8 is on the Housing Ombudsman's Complaints Performance Report. So that's an overview of the Housing Ombudsman's Landlord Performance Report for 22-23 and contains a breakdown of the Ombudsman's findings, maladministration, as well as a breakdown of the orders the Ombudsman has made to the Council. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Questions? I'll go first, if not. Oh, Councillor Redsill. Oh, big pardon, Councillor Spoke. I'll come at you.
Sorry. Not that I like to bring up garages, but as they're on there, it doesn't seem that we're getting that many complaints from garages, but why are we still not? I know Evelina was going to bring something back. Was that to this meeting, Evelina, or not? With garages, I thought there was something coming back to us. I just really wanted to know why we're not repairing the wood around the garages. We're just not doing the normal repairs on garages.
Evelina?
So I think two points there. We are absolutely repairing garages as and when they come to us, and we're still continuing in this financial year and in the next financial year a little bit with the refurbishment to garages. So that still continues. It's not coming to this forum. It is a written update that it is being prepared for yourself and for the committee.
It didn't mean the repairs to the actual garages, Evelina. You know, when people put in a complaint that it's leaking or whatever, I meant the normal wood fascias that sit round most of our garages that are rotting and actually falling away. I just wonder if we're picking that up within it.
So the short answer is if it requires a repair, it's there is a bit of a test, isn't it? And I can see the colleagues there who want to come in. We would pick it up if there was in a state that required repair. Do you want to come in?
Hi all. Sorry, just on the garage section, and we do an upgrade capital works programme. So we do day-to-day repairs, so garage renewal, guttering, fascias and roof that are reported by tenants. We work very closely with the garage lead, Claire Harvey. She gives us a lot of empty voids that she takes tenancies back from tenancies, and what we do is that full assessment's done and repairs are done before we re-relay it to new tenants. So far this year we've upgraded, in regards to upgrading fascia, soffits, roofs and garage doors, we've done Malpass Road, Shannon Way. We've also done Springfield, has been fully refurbished. If you go around the garages at the back, outside, they've been refurbished. We've left the hoarding up to avoid vandalism because it was vandalised before we put the hoardings up. We've also got a full programme for the remainder up to April to do works, which is currently 50–60% priced. Within budget and will be sanctioned. So due to weather now, we normally hold off for December, Christmas time, and we start January to April to fulfil that budget commitment. Okay.
It's going to be done, you know, because it isn't something that people would actually report to you. It's just normal general maintenance of the thing. But thanks for that.
It's general data stuff, so let's try and keep it in Chris's domain. Councillor Spate.
Thank you, Chair. It's nicely dressed up, but it's there is a significant increase in the number of complaints that we've received. And I know this is a national trend. I read something in one of the local government newspapers in the last couple of days. But this is a significant increase in the number of complaints, and a significant number of them are being upheld. I mean, an 18.8% year-on-year increase is, to me, very worrying. Can you give us some idea as to the I mean, it's easy to put statistics of the stories behind these complaints. Is there any particular growth area in complaints? Is there any reason, whether it's the administration of the incoming complaints that then causes more complaints? Because that's going to get worse, because we all seen the budget cuts that ahead for the telephones. Well, there won't be a telephone system. And all the things that are going to come up on us in the next 24 months. But I'm really worried about this significant increase in numbers. And I think we're downplaying it. We're not being investigative enough about it.
Chris?
Okay, so what we've done within the body of the report in section 7.3 is we've broken down the complaints received by issue nature in figure 8 in comparison with 2021-22. So we've broken down the number of complaints received by each service area in 2021-22 in comparison with 2022-23, provided a variance and a percentage variance too. So what that generally does is sets out exactly where we've seen those complaints increase in those service areas. So accounting for most of that increase or a good proportion of it is responsive repairs, where we've seen an increase in complaints of 87. So that's up from 148 in 2021-22 to 235 in 2022-23, with a 58.8% variance, and that accounts for a significant proportion of those complaints. We've also seen an increase in complaints for gas servicing and repairs, transforming homes, tenancy management and temporary accommodation, with the large largest numbers, but the majority of those are in that responsive repairs category. In terms of that second part of your question, there's probably colleagues in the room that can answer that much better than I can. So, yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Spate. Just to pick up on a few of those points that you've raised then. So in terms of, you're absolutely right, it's a sector trend, but that doesn't mean we take it any less seriously. We operate about 40 of these types of contracts across the UK, and we're consistently seeing these types of increases, particularly since the change in the Ombudsman's Code to complaint reporting sort of 24 months ago. So it is a challenge. To give it some context, I think, well, firstly, your point on how well are we handling these complaints, how well are we responding to them. So 96% of all complaints are responded to within time, which I think is important. When there's been dissatisfaction, firstly, they are responded to quickly within the 10 and 20-day targets. And also the fact that they are upheld on occasion as well, more than an occasion, does show how robustly that process views these complaints. The other piece of context, which I think is really important, is the number of transactions we have with customers. We've talked before about it's about 40,000 repairs per year, and that most of those repairs start from a position of something's gone wrong. So it's a challenging service to deliver, and the number of complaints received in 22-23 is 0.59% of that 40,000 transactions. But within that, it's still really, really important that we understand the trends within that. Now, typically, we see very little dissatisfaction around the conduct of operatives on site, the quality of work, and where we typically get it wrong is the sort of 10% of repairs that we don't complete on that first visit that require multiple visits, multiple trades, and our communication hasn't been good enough on those types of repairs over the last couple of years. So that's where most of our focus is. There's been a lot of training for our planning team, who coordinate all of that work and keep updating customers on when we'll be coming back, when the next trade will be coming, when the materials will be available to complete the repair. And we have just invested in some additional resource, planning and supervisory resource around those more complex repairs as well. So we are really clear what's driving the dissatisfaction. I think we've got plans in place to reduce that and to improve that. And we did also talk last time we were kindly invited along to your meeting around the fact that it had been a tough period, sort of going back 2 years, coming out of the pandemic, increases in demand, lack of availability of resources and materials. We are through that now, and actually if you look at the live work in progress numbers, if you look at the average days to complete a repair at 7 days per repair, they are very, very good stats, sector-leading stats. So I think we're through that issue. We're clear on where the dissatisfaction is being driven from, and I think we've got good plans to try and correct that.
Thank you. Councillor Diod.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for a very comprehensive report. How confident are you that our tenants know how to complain? Because I don't get an awful lot of feedback as a councillor that they do know where to go.
Yes, I will. So this is ongoing work. Each time, I don't know if you are the recipients of the housing news, but we try and publicise that. Every opportunity we've got, we try and speak to them to say this is the way to complain. Housing Ombudsman has put very strict sort of instructions on all landlords to ensure that tenants know how to complain. Absolutely. We are also, there's also obviously a campaign, national campaign going on where Housing Ombudsman is doing their own sort of publicity around that. So we hope that there is enough kind of means and ways that people are aware. And I think the second thing I would like to sort of mention is sometimes when a casework is picked up by yourselves or your colleagues, sometimes it's actually turned and registered as a complaint when it's got more of a I am dissatisfied with this, that and the other, as opposed to just a question that you might sometimes get asked. So we try and really look out proactively for those statements of dissatisfaction and not just take them just because it was raised with a councillor that we take it as a members' inquiry. we often translate it and log it as a complaint. And I think, lastly, the sort of I think as we get better with that individual contact with our residents, I think we will have even more opportunity to kind of get that feedback, and on the one hand provide resolution on the spot, but also just sort of reiterate, how to complain if one is dissatisfied.
So would the success in you telling the residents how to complain increase the number of complaints itself, and is that the possible reason why the complaints are gradually going up?
That's right, and this is one of the reasons I think we sort of talk about the body of the report. The housing world is changing. There is a lot more focus on the housing ombudsman on actually informing residents about their rights. There's a lot more focus, as you will be aware, around the state of the housing stock, the state of somebody's home, the kind of how to talk about dissatisfaction. There's been quite substantial media campaigns, all the way to TV, radio, and all that. So we absolutely see this, and I think this was Lucas's point, that the sector is absolutely feeling it, that there is a lot more kind of information out there for people to know how to raise the complaint, but also how to report a repair, how to get their issue resolved. It doesn't have to be a repair. Obviously, we so happen to talk about repair, and obviously the sort of the world of social housing is absolutely changing to get the resident focus and at the core of everything. So to have that sort of golden thread of resident kind of participation and engagement and co-production. So it will inevitably bring more and more complaints. But as I said at the outset, this is vital for us. This is the way we get kind of the feedback from what's going on out there as well. So we take every single one of them quite seriously, and look at the sort of the trends, the analysis of it, the lessons learned.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Chinnick?
Yeah, on 7.3, we've got transforming homes. The number of complaints have gone up. What measures are being put in place for that? Because when I've been out and about as a councillor and gone into some of these transforming homes, I've seen some horrendous things,
I'll take that one. There are sort of two main reasons here. So the first reason is the time that people are unable to use their properties, and we have got, you might recall, quite a substantial programme of works to the non-traditional stock. So some of the area category 3 and 5 properties dotted around the borough, and we had to decant some of our residents, and those works are taking a lot of time, and that is the main reason for complaint. I think the other reason around complaints for transforming homes is just the impact, because we are inevitably within individuals' homes. Obviously, works to bathrooms to kitchens. The end result we get very often month on month, 100% satisfaction for transforming homes specifically, that particular programme. But obviously, before it gets to this, you will appreciate that our residents will have builders in their homes for a number of weeks at a time, and that is the difficulty in that. Thank you.
If I can ask a question on 8.3 to 8.5, where we're talking about rates of maladministration. Obviously, I appreciate that we're broadly speaking in line with the national average, and ultimately there haven't been any cases of severe maladministration, and the bottom line is it's only cost us something in the order of, I think it was less than £1,000 I read somewhere. But Evelyn, could you talk slightly to the narrative behind it? Because I'm slightly concerned that we seem overly content with the fact that we are in line with maladministration figures nationally, and surely that's what we want to take as an absolute ceiling, not a floor.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. It is not something that we're happy about. all of the landlords with maladministration rate of 50% and more were written to by the Minister to say this is absolutely not acceptable. So did we, because it is 55. Every single one of those cases, because obviously in order to hit that ombudsman resident needs to go through stage 1 and 2. So at that point, things have gone really quite bad for residents, and obviously whatever issues we put in place to remedy that are not to resident satisfaction. So no, it's not something that we're accepting, quite to the contrary. Just sort of the other day, because obviously quite a number of those are to do with the repair element, and I think colleagues would sort of want to add to it, but we've put additional measures to actually review every sort of every complaint that goes to stage 2. We put in additional steps during the process as well to keep in touch with the resident or the complainant throughout as we handle that stage 2, and then we're looking to really see as to what else can we do differently. Sometimes it is the sort of us falling foul of following our own procedures. This is the maladministration essentially, that our procedure said something and we did not attend to something within the kind of the spirit of the procedure or policy that we set out. So again, just a little bit of an active, are those policies and procedures still fit for purpose, and the sort of the undoing and smoothing that out as well. So yeah, absolutely not acceptable by us either.
Councillor Spate?
Thank you, Chair. It's a sort of follow-on from my previous question, and I appreciate we've got a lot of questions. But I need to go back to this issue of customer care and relationships. And before I say anything that might be deemed derogatory, I should put on record my admiration for you, Alina, and the staff, Chris, who I've dealt with on a few case studies lately, and they've been superb. And Eulina herself took the time and trouble to speak to someone who had been pretty distressed. And I think that is absolutely fantastic that someone in such a senior position within the council takes the time and effort to do that. Of course, it is by its very nature, that's going to be the exception rather than the rule. What worries me is the rule. I'm going to make a derogatory statement about the demographics of the borough, but a lot of the people who are in our council houses are not the most fluent in terms of using technology and dealing with the system of us as a landlord and getting in touch with us. We're going to bulldoze over £500,000 off the budget for customer contact in the next 12 months. There's over £500,000. That's going to make a huge difference, and the systems that they're talking about in place are sort of triage systems by phone, by pressing buttons and removing customer contact. I think this is the scariest thing I've seen of all of the things that we've got. The people, when they're going to be contacting the housing department with specific problems, they're going to have there's going to be specific problems. They're going to want to talk to somebody. They're going to want to register it. Now, I know, because you've been kind enough to show it, and it's brilliant. You've got a great back-end system, logging complaints, putting them in. We've had examples of it, and it's great. But I just think we're going to have a massive disconnect in the next 12 months. And we need, we can look, this is about focusing backwards. We've got to start focusing forwards, because this council is in the deep and smelly stuff, and is going to be in the deep and smelly stuff for a long time. And you guys are going to find your hands tied behind your backs, because there ain't the money in the pot to pay for the customer care that we're going to need. And I'm just saying, I don't mean to be insulting. Are we spending enough time looking at how we're going to cope with customer care in housing, because that's why we're here tonight, over the next 2 to 3 years, when the service ability, the ability of this council to service the residents in this borough is going to be absolutely massacred by draconian cuts. And let's, we haven't got to knowing all the figures yet, but more than £600,000 is going to be taken out of the customer contact network next year. That's got to make a huge difference. You guys are at the front end. Unfortunately, our residents are at the other end of that phone line to the front end, and I am really, really worried. And I'm just seeking some absolute assurance that you share my concern and that you're making plans to make sure that we somehow bridge that gap, because I have no idea how we're going to do it.
Evelina?
This is one of the moments where I am so happy that I actually work for housing, and I sit within the beautifully ring-fenced housing revenue account, which means that I am not, and my residents and my services are not to that extent subject to the sort of things that you think that might come. We have got our own repair contact centre and will continue delivering that. And our tenancy management officers as well will continue having sort of their way of contacting customers. And I think it's important when we move more into the sort of integrated locality working that we actually are sort of in the locality, you know, amongst the residents. So the contact should really actually for us be improved. And that's not, for integration, I don't just mean housing, I mean adult social care, community-led support teams, local area coordinators, and all that. So that is a good thing for us. I think the other way of just focusing on the resident that lives in council housing in particular, we continue obviously, and we will continue carrying out satisfaction surveys. And as you know, this is another way of communicating and conversing with our residents. We look at the feedback sort of fairly regularly, and again we'll be sort of reporting on it to yourselves. I mean, there could be something else probably added by my colleagues. The other sort of thing I would just say on the wider kind of corporate matter is when the more difficult cases, the more kind of where we really want to have that good conversation with the resident, that will continue. So there will be opportunity to have those and housing, and in particular with that sort of homelessness approaches and housing options kind of provision, support and all of that, that will continue, and we'll be able to have those good conversations with the residents. So I'm sort of really happy about that.
Thanks, Evelina. Yeah, I can't speak for the corporate position, but certainly in terms of the repairs call centre, and clearly that's, as we've seen, a huge number of customer contacts that we receive every single year that generate those 40,000 repairs. So we are on a bit of a journey, and we try to support the council wherever we can. We develop IT systems in-house, and lots of those are shared. You know, there have been examples across the course of this year where new developments have been rolled out free of charge as part of our long-term strategic partnership. And we are on a bit of a journey, as everyone is, of sort of channel shift, and that we shouldn't be just taking phone calls going forward. And we are releasing a customer app later this year. However, our position is it should always absolutely be choice of the customer. So channel shift is fine, but it always needs to be multi-channel. So if someone is comfortable picking up the phone, that's what they should always be able to access the service in that way. There will be people who are very comfortable using an app and may want to book their repairs beyond 5 o'clock, and whilst they're sat at home in the evening, we want to be able to cater for those people as well. So I think we're in good shape in terms of the repairs call centre. I obviously understand your question in terms of the broader corporate customer contact.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to add, I spend quite a significant proportion of my time in the Mears branch office, and I sit at a bank or two desks away from the contact centre, and I hear the conversations that have been had with our residents, the type of customer care that's offered, some of the issues, and I will have direct conversations with the customer care team to get a bit more beneath what's the concern of the resident. And that's the type of process. Yes, we can have all rigidly mapped out flowcharts, but actually that human contact, those conversations, discussions, how do we fix it? You know, what's the quickest way? You know, two people here talking, the customer care team talking to each other is often the best way we can resolve those issues for the residents. And that's what we're keeping that practice up. That's the commitment that we've maintained.
Just to add, really, I've got a dedicated customer care manager in branch that deals with all complaints, stage 1, stage 2, and a dedicated officer. Her role is a complaints officer stroke IRLO, so if I need to engage and go out and meet tenants on site, we make sure we do so. And one of the things we promote is once we receive the complaint, we pride ourselves in phoning the tenant, introducing ourselves as the person handling their complaint, and we kind of reiterate the timescale in which that will take, and then we notify when we pass back to council. So we keep that them updates, the appointments flowing, so the residents know what's going on. We have 4 call handlers of all our complaints training. Me and all of my team, operationally planning supervisors, are undergoing the Ombudsman training that's free online. Things have changed and evolved very much over the last 2 years, so refreshing that training and familiarising ourselves is really important. And the final thing, in December, we've agreed to do a training course on customer care scenarios based over the last sort of 2 to 3 years. We've written questions jointly. Client representation will be in, and we'll have all disciplines from a manager, supervisor, planner, call handler, and a client lead. So we can put perspective of what the customer's experience and what the impact is on the different work areas. That's been quite well received from the tenancy committee group, and obviously from all the staff. They're really engaged and looking forward to that. So we're always trying to drive the improvements and prepare for what's coming. But one thing we pride ourselves on is we're always available. We'll always pick the phone up. And we enjoy, all my team enjoy it. We enjoy talking to the residents and doing what's right. And we learn from their mistakes as best we can.
Councillor Spade, brief follow-up.
Very briefly. Thank you. That gives me a huge amount of reassurance. The fact that you use the phrase several times, pick up the phone and talk to people, is great. I'm reassured by you, Alina's statement about the HRA fund. In other words, the dedicated money that comes in from our council houses is kept within that sphere. I hope that the claws are kept off that by everybody else, because this is massively important. People's homes are massively important. So thank you for that assurance. And as I say, hopefully that anybody listening who's worried shouldn't be as worried as I possibly am.
Councillor Russell?
Thank you. Thanks for Gary as well, because I've been in your call centre and answered a few calls, so it's praise where praise is due. Councillor Spate is right, and Evelina will know that when I've got a complaint I will make it, but you get more praise from me, I think, than anything else. I've just got one or two, just 2 small questions. One is on page 20 with staff training. Could you just clarify a little bit? I don't want to know names of anybody or what you're doing. I just want to know what that staff training is. And the other one is, and Chris has probably answered that, the voids are 18. I don't know why you would, might be a silly question, but why you would get complaints from voids, because voids are empty properties?
If I take the voids one first, probably Gary really wants to jump on this. It's really very often the sort of the state of the property as it's ready for letting that the residents are sometimes complaining about, and I think very often it's the sort of connection of the gas and things like that, where there's a little bit of a process when somebody moves in, we can't have the gas running straight away. The training is that the Ombudsman training.
Order as a result of the Ombudsman.
That's right. Yeah. So we have put our staff, the way Gary mentioned that he did that with his staff, we did the same with our staff who handle complaints. We put them through the Housing Ombudsman training, and some have done it more than once because things change, but also it's a bit of a refresher, and a really kind of some of the Housing Ombudsman messages are quite stark, so it's very often quite a good reminder to just tune into it and attend it once more.
Come back, Chair, just quickly. Just on, you mentioned the call centre a little while ago, not Gary's call centre, but our call centre. Sometimes I don't think they've got the advice or they've got the wherefore to go, because most of the time, if you go there, they can't get hold of anybody because they're not working in the offices, they're working from home, so there's no phone numbers to go to. So I think they're very helpful. I've found the call centre really good, but they come to a standstill where they've got nowhere to go. So I think they need a little bit more insight or a few more numbers to get hold of people, to put people, even us councillors, to put us in the right direction, you know. And I think that the information is not going through to the call centre. No.
Right.
The way the call centre, the main call centre works with us, it really just depends what matter the resident is ringing about. So, say for example, if they ring around about income collection, rent arrears, welfare, financial welfare information, some of it will be provided by the call centre, and it will be quite a detailed conversation. They could even set up repayment arrangements and things like that. When residents want to speak to the housing officer, it's a system that we call a customer slip. So it's a request for a callback, essentially. It is all registered within our housing management system. An officer picks that up and then contacts the resident back. So you're absolutely right. It is by design so that there isn't necessarily a duty line. We are, with Peter Doherty and colleagues in the call centre, just literally at the moment designing a bit of a pilot if we could do for them to handle more inquiries. It's not a problem. The call centre is willing. It's just not being done like that. So it is by design that it's a customer callback service. We do monitor that very, very efficiently. Chris is kind of showing me that there's a beautiful Power BI dashboard, and it's one of the most used across the council, because obviously colleagues from other services that use the same method are also using it. So we absolutely follow through every single slip, every single contact is actioned, and if it's not for whatever reason, then obviously then there is additional training and those individuals are spoken to. But we are at the moment going quite well, and Chris would tell me that it takes 1.85 average working day to answer a customer slip. Thank you.
Thanks, Evelina. I think that just getting back to the, we've got to stop the numbers being given out, because we get numbers as well, we're residents too, but as members, our housing staff have got numbers on there, revert you back to the call centre again, which we've got to get rid of that. You know, if they've got a mobile phone and they're using it from the council, then it should be answered, not just put us back to the call centre, because that's you know, it doesn't go anywhere.
That is absolutely at the moment the setup, and as I say, it directs us to the raising a customer slip for that approach. On the ground, tenants management officers over the last, I think, 18 months, it was definitely one of the first things I did when I arrived here, to say, you work with those residents, you have got mobile numbers from work, just give them out. So they do. They don't do that on the more kind of formal and generic type of correspondence, just in case somebody is taken unwell or is not working, is on leave. So the customer contact allows the wider team to access it, or managers to have oversight as well. So there isn't a contact that is just, you know, in your voicemail. And I must say, I am sometimes guilty of it. Some of you do call me. I don't have the chance to call back, and I've got it, but it's only just really me and the phone. There isn't any other kind of system to have the oversight of that. So that's done with design, but there is a lot. There is absolutely individual officers giving out their phone numbers, and in particular when there is a bit of an ongoing casework, as opposed to just a more generic sort of information that's required. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll move us on now. So everyone happy with recommendation 1.1?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Chris, thank you very much. I would say, as an aside, Chris walked me through one of the dashboards that we saw on our Mears Way Day the other day, and I was tinkering with different ways of getting information accessible to councillors. It really is jolly impressive. So if anyone wants to go over some of the, I think the word geek is still okay. If anyone wants to go over the geeky stuff, it is jolly good, and what Chris could show you is quite impressive. I think geek is one of the few protected words that's still okay. Item 1, Blackshots demolition and redevelopment. Evelyn, you kicking off, then handing over to Keith?
Yes, I am, and obviously colleagues are leaving the room, so thank you so much for
thank you very much for joining us.
So this is a report that it's an update report for yourselves. Obviously, at the time of writing, there was the information available. You know, things move on. So Keith will do an update to the update report, if I may say so. Yeah, overall, over to you.
Okay, so yeah, just some bits to bring up to date. Councillors, good evening. So around stakeholder engagement, the resident consultation process we referenced in the paper has been running over the summer months, has now concluded, and the main issues of concern really haven't changed from that reported in 3.4 in the paper. The work of the independent tenant and leaseholder advisor, that's continuing, and they are holding workshops with the residents of the tower blocks, and in fact there's one on Thursday this week. So that work is still continuing, so there's that engagement. We've had some good progress in emptying the blocks, and so we've moved on from the numbers reported in the paper, and there, at the moment there's 28 tenants who have actually moved out. There's a further 3 who have accepted offers, so that's about 18.5% of the residents, of the tenants, and we've had some good progress with the negotiations with the leaseholders there. So overall, it's been really good progress, and we're above where we would have expected to be at this time. Clearly, we're moving into towards Christmas, and the amount of empty properties will slow down over then. But I can, it's reassuring that we are well on target for that. In relation to the design, so there's been a pre-application meeting held with the Council's Planning Service based on the designs that were shared with residents at the last consultation event, and we're just waiting for the detailed response from the planners there. The business case that gets referred to and the viability, that's the drafting of that is well underway, and we'll have that finalised now within the next couple of weeks. There's no further progress to report on the property issues mentioned in the paper. However, on social value, it's good to report that we've had one school student who spent 2 weeks gaining work experience with the consultants that we've engaged. A second student is lined up to repeat that, and there's plans underway for sort of a career talk drop-in session with a local school. So that's a bit of a byproduct of the consultancy work that we've got. We continue to engage, as Councillor Rettel knows, with ward members to ensure they're briefed in advance of letters and correspondence going out. Well, I think most recently we met, I think probably 2 weeks ago, and that's updated in relation to the notices that will be going out shortly that effectively halt the right to buy applications from any tenants in the block if they wished to do so. Lastly, on programme, the council, as you the members may be aware, is currently engaging with His Majesty's Treasury to make a special case to allow the council to fund the borrowing of the new homes, because as you may be well be aware, the authorities in the council's financial position cannot currently borrow to start new capital programmes. So once the outcome of that approach to Treasury is known, and it will be positive from that, we'll come back to this committee and then Cabinet with detailed proposals for the next phase of the programme, and that would include procurement of a main contractor. So we're working towards coming back with the plan of perhaps spring for them. That's my summary. Very open to take any questions. Thank you.
Councillor Shinnick.
Yeah, on 3.4, it's issues arising from the consultation, is concerns over the loss of open space. How much space is going to be lost over, like, the area where they're going to rebuild?
So I wish I had percentage numbers to give you, and I can't at the meeting, but we could certainly look at it. But the main area of concern is the area where the sports courts currently are on King George's Fields. That's the main area of concern from residents. So in proportion to the whole of the red line area that was agreed by members at Cabinet back last year, I can't give you a percentage, but it's certainly a smaller section But that's the main area of concern. I'm happy to follow up after the meeting and give you like a bit of a scale or some measurement of that.
Yeah, Shannon?
Yeah, you know you're moving the people out of the blocks. Is this mainly one block you're concentrating on, or is it, you know, across the board?
No, we're not. We're moving people out across all 3 blocks. They're fairly evenly balanced at the moment. I mean, one block's slightly more than the others, but no, we're going across all 3. All 3 are suffering from the same issues. We need to empty out all 3 blocks, and so we're approaching it in a you know, most positive way that we can, and moving the residents out across all 3 as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Councillor Redsill?
She's good at How did you know I was going to say something? No, good news, Keith. I mean, housing has done really, really well. I've never expected to get to 30 at this time, you know, of the year. So we've done really, really well. Just a couple of complaints that we're not engaging as well as we perhaps could be. The people have come up from Barking and Dagenham. They've been really good. You know, they've engaged more, I think. We've got one young lady in there who has got so much mould she can't even have the heating on. She's got a little boy with a stoma bag who's 9 and a little girl with asthma who can't have a shower because she hasn't got one. So the heating is costing her £20 a day, so she can't use that either. So the flat is just cold. But housing have been good. We've met with her, and probably it will filter through to you, Evelina. But we can't leave people like that. You know, it's so wrong. I mentioned it to officers the other day. I think it would be nice to have a meeting with each block in its turn. You know, whether you'd get many people turn up, but just to have a meeting to say we're going to do Keir Hardy today, something, you know, next week or that, just so they know that, cause there's questions they want to ask, but there's not. People are getting worried now that they're living on a floor with no one. They're just on their own. So I think that's just a concern. I don't want to put anything on it because you're doing really, really well. You know, this is the biggest project we've ever done as a council, and I'm so pleased that it's going as well as it is. But I think and going back to Councillor Shinnott talking about the green belt, I hate to say it over my dead body, but it probably might be. But that we've been offered another bit of green belt, but I can't see the point of taking one bit of green belt to give another bit of green belt, because I don't even think highways will agree with it, because both ends there are dead ends, streets, and it's not very viable. So if we're going to, you know, if the Lower Thames crossing doesn't come, it'll open up a bit more for us. So, but no, I've really got, you know, can't praise you enough for the work that you've done, because it's brilliant. But we just need to get that little bit more in action with the people, just feeding them a bit more information.
So, thank you, Councillor. I appreciate the kind words from my colleagues who aren't here that have been doing all the work in terms of the relocation and the offers that are made for residents. But we'll take back your comments, particularly around the engagement. We do have a decant officer that works particularly on this project. The colleagues you referred to earlier from Newman Francis, who are the independent tenant and leaseholder advisor. Again, yeah, it's pleasing to hear positive reports about them. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Gerard?
Yeah, thanks for your report. Everything seems to be looking as though it's on track and on target. What about the budget? How are we doing financially?
So the main concern is around the capital spend that would be required to achieve the redevelopment of the new homes and the demolition. So that was sort of my final point in the update, in that colleagues from the leading sort of directorate side on the finance side are approaching His Majesty's Treasury to look for that special case for approval, so that we can go through and appoint a main contractor. That conversation has started. We don't have a sort of a clue because it's a process rather than a single conversation. And as soon as we know where that's heading and the result from that will absolutely inform what we can do in terms of, a budget around the costing of the projects, meeting the cost of the projects. The work we're doing on the business case absolutely does identify a cost, and it sets out sort of the viability of it, and that's all positive at the moment. And that will be wrapped up in the final business case, which we would need to bring back.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, a couple of things that I had a question, same as Sue touched on it. It sort of pales into insignificance when I hear stories of 9-year-old children with stoma bags living in grossly offensive conditions in this day and age. And we're going to talk about the housing strategy later on and the impact of the child that died in damp and mould in London and how it's influenced thinking in the public sector. Well, we shouldn't need a child to die in London because we've had this problem in Thurrock for a hell of a long time. I've been writing about it for 20 years. I've been in all those flats and I've seen it. And that just mortifies me, what you've said. It absolutely shocks me. And I thought I'd seen some really bad ones. I hope we can look after that family, and it should be a priority. And I know the caring team over there will do their best. But nevertheless, I'm going to ask the question that does pale into insignificance in a way. Fields in Trust and the relationship with them. We've already seen in Tilbury that this council went ahead with a project and didn't consider Fields in Trust and basically landed themselves in a bit of doodah on that one. Not the greatest hour of forward planning. Can you give us that insurance that we will not fall foul and steal more land off Fields in Trust? And I get it's difficult and I get its constraints, and at the end of the day on that particular site I think there is room for compromise and sacrifice, but we have to plan ahead. It also worries me what Steve just said, that we're still not even sure we're going to have the money to go ahead with all this. Bloody scary.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, I can give you absolutely the assurance regarding Fields in Trust. We absolutely recognise the requirements because of the dedication of the land there, and we have opened up initial conversations with them. We're not still, to a position of conclusion by any means, but we'll open up a conversation with them. So we've taken that on board, and I hope that gives you the reassurance in that regard. Thank you.
If I can just follow on from that question, in terms of the finances, we know that it's going to require dispensation from the Treasury to either breach the current capital envelope or to have some sort of direct financial support to do it. What work is being done internally to build the case for dispensation? Because it is not an easy ask, it is a complicated ask. It takes serious effort to get something like this over the line, and reading the report, one could see how a Treasury official would say, you have made a success out of essentially voiding these towers and getting people out. We do not currently see the imperative of giving you the money to bring them down. We can simply allow you to continue to be successful in voiding them. So where is the case for... Because I can see in 3.13 and 3.14 that exploratory discussions are going in for the planning permission. But until we get the dispensation, we know nothing can go forward.
That's right. So that work is really led, and those conversations are led by Stephen Mayer, the Chief Financial Officer. There's a number of officers within the Finance Department that are working tirelessly on that process. Keith's team have provided all of the sort of evidence available to date for Teviot and Blackshears, because, as you know, these are the two that we're using as a case, as a special case to do that. So we are sort of keeping it at the highest possible kind of level of seniority within the council to do that. We are at this moment in time also of the opinion that we have also got the Commissioner's sort of support on that, so that is also making it a lot more comfortable for us to be having this conversation. So I don't know if that gives you enough reassurance, but there is an absolute huge amount of work done, led by the Chief Financial Officer, to have those conversations, and we have taken very active part in that, providing all of the information there.
Councillor Edsel.
Thanks, James. Just going back to Fields in Trust, just picking up on Keith. Fields in Trust don't own the land. They are looking after whatever, and I know what Councillor Spate meant with, I think, that piece of land in Tilbury probably had a covenant on it anyway, and nobody's looked into that. So I know that, you know, whatever we do, it's no good giving a bit of land back somewhere else, because it doesn't help. You know, the field needs to be contained as the field, and it's no good giving us another bit of green belt somewhere else. So we've got two pieces of green belt we can use. So if we're going to use a green belt that is green belt now and a bit of farmer's field that is green belt, I can't see the point. You know, that doesn't make... But I think Fields in Trust just like to be kept in touch. I know when I done all the stuff on the field, we just keep them informed of what we're doing. You know, they don't own the land because we do, but it's just, you know, they're sort of keeping an eye on it, really, that it doesn't go anywhere, because it was given to the people of Thurrock.
So just by way of sort of clarification, really, I mean, there's the green belt issue and the Fields in Trust issue, whilst they're clearly related, are separate things, and the replacing of land is where we're talking in terms of replacing the Fields in Trust land that's currently proposed to be removed from King George's Field, and so we would need to find another piece of land, and that's the conversation that's underway, so that Fields in Trust land is replaced. That's the requirement of you know, that particular dedication. It doesn't affect sort of that green belt status, which is something sort of different, but that helps.
Cool. Any other comments? Right, thank you very much, Keith. I would perhaps ask on the work programme, I know we do have a future update on Teviot coming up. Perhaps when that update on Teviot does come up, perhaps we could have someone from the finance team join us for that meeting to talk about how the case is going to build the case for dispensation.
I can take that away. That's fine. I'm hoping that we might actually have the information by then.
That'd be splendid if we did.
Yeah. So we might actually the Teviot is penciled in to already have that information to be like a full business case for you to comment on, as opposed to just an update. So we brought Blackshears as an update because, again, this was penciled in as a full report for the actual business case, but it's not ready. So, yeah, hopefully.
Thank you. Right, happy with the Councillor Spate?
Yeah, I was just... funny, I thought you were going to say what I was just about to say. I think it would be helpful, and we note the progress when we follow the recommendation, and I'm happy to do that, but I think we can put some caveats in. We're not due to come back to Blackshots until the meeting after next, when it's still down as to be confirmed. Would it be not prudent for us just to ask for a very brief, we can note it, but at the next meeting, we just get a very brief financial report. So I really think we've got to keep on top of this, and we mustn't let it slip. And if we're going to let it slip into the second, third month of next year, you know, whatever. So just briefly ask on the agenda for the next meeting that we get a 2-minute or 3-minute financial report on progress that hopefully will have been made.
I will take that away and discuss with finance colleagues. I think present and verbal update is probably the sort of the way forward, if I may. Yeah, for January.
James, it's good that Keith and Evelina keep the ward councillors in, and they do. You know, we are having month by month meetings on this, so, you know, I'm grateful for that, because we can only take that forward if we work together. So,
Chair, if I may, just very briefly. Yep. I just really wanted to say, obviously, massive thanks overall for the positive comments. I just really wanted to say for everyone, did all of those individual cases that you mentioned, or anything that you know of, or anyone knows of, obviously that we would absolutely look to, find properties sooner rather than later. It's not a problem. This is why we've got the resource on the ground, sort of looking for those appropriate homes. So absolutely, we will attend to every single one of them. And obviously, overall, we know the state of the building, and we want to make sure that residents are decanted.
Through you, Chair. Just to say that Peter and Steve have met with 3 lots of tenants. So I know it's not a lot, but they've been very good. So I hope they'll take that to you, because we need to get that small family out there. Definitely. Thank you.
Okay, housing strategy, year 1 update. Ryan.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the first of the reports I'm presenting tonight is the year 1 update for the housing strategy. The housing strategy, asset management strategy, resident engagement strategy were all agreed last summer, July 2022, by Cabinet. Came to this committee for your final feedback shortly before then. It's worth setting the context that shortly after the strategy was adopted, of course, the Council was entered into government intervention, which has had some previously unforeseen challenges. The report itself sets out the overarching aims and ambitions of those strategies, appreciating that there are members of the committee here today that weren't previously members of this committee when it was presented last year. It also sets out some of the achievements so far in the first year, and again, a report of 22 pages. There are plenty to pick out. The other thing that is worth flagging, and is right that we include, is a section towards the end of the report where we've highlighted challenges that we've had, things which were unforeseen, things that have needed to be rethought, and honestly, as we said when we discussed the strategy, things that may not ultimately be deliverable in changing context, and that certainly turned out to be the case. So rather than go through any more detail in the report which is in front of you, I'm very happy to have the conversation and answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Keith. Thank you very much, Ryan. Councillor Dowd.
Yeah, I remember last year's strategy and how good it was, how absolutely marvellous everything was set out, and I thought, wow, if only we can achieve that, it'd be absolutely wonderful. So what things do you think we won't be able to achieve? Or is that all of it?
No, it's absolutely not all of it. I'll just share a bit of feedback that I had from one of the community forums that I attended when I was talking to residents, and I presented it to them and said, this sounds like some sort of utopia. My response was, I think we need to aim high with our strategies, and yes, except there are some things that we can't deliver. The housing strategy, for example, does talk about the development of CO1, and this is something that's been discussed in this committee and other arenas as well, so I'm not sure it's one for me to go into much more detail. So that's one of those things which, absolutely has changed. There are other things which, because of intervention and because of having to work in a radically different way, have become more important and have accelerated. So the section around delivering housing services, about integrating, about sort of blending and working across the boundaries that we've had in this organisation, are actually moving at a far greater rate than they would have, I believe. We had ambitions across the housing service to work in a different way. Those ambitions have been accelerated and expanded, certainly across our directorate, and I'm sure beyond that as well into areas like children's services, for example. So yeah, there's plenty in the strategy which is absolutely deliverable, but it's the reality of the situation is there are some things which now aren't.
Chair, through you.
Yeah, please.
I was wondering, because a number of services on non-housing side is sort of reducing in staff, has that caused you sort of many more problems?
I'll take that. I think the short answer is no, and probably the longer one is not yet felt. We have been on our own transformation journey, as you know, and we have been looking to integrate with others. And as I sort of keep on saying, this is really all about that sort of better conversation with the resident, taking residents as we find them, playing into their strengths, and sort of trying to sort of support as much as they want to be supported through their own lens. So I think, if anything, this has allowed us, as Ryan says, to actually accelerate that, because it was all happening sort of through a transformational programme, and it was all on a basis of test and learn and kind of get into those sort of new solutions naturally and learn and iterate it as you do. Whereas now I think we're taking, okay, this has proven to be a success, and we're just rolling it out a little bit more quicker. So I think that's kind of how we feel it on the ground. Obviously, these are testing times for all of us, up and down the sort of the hierarchy. So there is definitely a lot more sort of anxiety amongst staff, and I think we see it, we sense it amongst my own team, amongst my extended team. I see it, so we try and support staff as much as we can as well.
Councillor Pate.
Yeah, I have two questions. I'll go to the first one. I'm sure you'll be aware, and indeed you've held up in some instances Basildon as an exemplar council in the way they do some matters relating to housing. The cabinet at Basildon last week agreed a significant change in strategy at Basildon with a view to freeing up properties. That they're going to take two large sections of sheltered housing accommodation, Felmore's being one, I can't quite remember which one the other one is, and they're basically going to bring them into the general housing stock. And the reasoning behind that is there are a number of problems with voids in sheltered housing complexes. They didn't really feel the balance and structure of organisation of them was there at a time when there was a huge need for permanent accommodation for families who could use some of that sheltered housing. And they're mindful of the fact there are a lot of people who do need sheltered housing, but they think the balance is wrong at the moment. And as I say, they've taken what some might call a bold step, some might call it innovative, some may call it a risk. I don't know. Depends on where you put your money. But we've got quite a bit of sheltered housing, and I'm aware, for example, and you were in one of it, one person who was offered a property within a sheltered housing complex who actually, at the end, turned it down, which I wasn't sure was the best decision to make. But nevertheless, we looked at it as there was a property within a sheltered housing complex, but met someone's need from a wider sphere. And you do touch on it in here in 5.1.9. Do you just have any thoughts on where we could go with sheltered housing in terms of restructuring it across the borough? And I'll come back to my second one when you've answered that.
So if I just start that, so the one in point 5, we talk about our review of the housing allocation scheme. So we have actually made changes to the housing allocation scheme to, on the one hand, allow residents more flexibility, but to also allow us more flexibility. In terms of review of the stock, this is one of the ones that we say towards the end of the report at 8.3 that we really wanted to do more to rationalise that stock. That would have required some investment, so that's one of the things that didn't necessarily happen. We have done some rationalisation of the stock, and we have, as you know, when we finished building Beaconsfield, we moved people from Alexandra Road, which was the former sheltered, and changed designation of that stock because it just was not appropriate for sheltered housing residents with the sort of steps up and down. So on the kind of smaller scale where we can, we're doing it, and we have done it during the kind of year one because we set out to do it. And I think thirdly, what I would say, there is an absolute need to review the kind of the accommodation provision or the strategy for the people across the borough. So we know the sort of the demographics changing, and we're expecting to have more. So that's kind of it. We talk about it, but that requires a little bit of investment. Did you?
Thanks, Evelyn. No, in fairness, that was most of what I was going to touch on, really. So you stole my thunder there.
Councillor Spate, your second question.
Yeah, and we are talking strategy here and what may be, and a large portion of this report talks about provision of new housing and where we go with that. I'm led to believe that Thurrock Regeneration Limited will be wound up in the not too distant future. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's what I'm led to believe. I think as a council, I think the hopes of us actually building much new housing in the short to medium term, other than that, related to specific programmes like Blackshots, are probably negligible. I can't see us getting the go-ahead to go out and borrow capital to build. So I'm not sure whether or not this is overly optimistic or not. And I just would like your thoughts on acquisition and building of new properties. And you, Elena, have spoke, myself and you, Elena, spoke many times about FI and that way we've been buying houses. I remain somewhat on the cusp of whether or not it's a good idea or not. Time will tell. But could you just give us an overview? We're going to need new social housing in Thurrock, and I'm just concerned about how we're going to get it, if we are at all going to get it.
I am even more concerned, as you are. Our housing list is ever growing. Our approaches are increasing, and you might you'll be seeing that I think report shortly on the homelessness update. So I am really worried about that. I'm hoping that we will be able to build, to borrow, to invest into stock and build it. So we're taking, as we said, Blackshots and Devitt as the sort of initial test case, because there is a requirement to invest anyway. So even if we can't build them out, we're going to need to significantly invest in the Tevitt in particular, if that is the case. So it's the sort of, do we borrow to build new and more, or do we borrow to refurbish and remain as is? In terms of the sort of the acquisitions, my greatest need at the moment in terms of housing is people requiring temporary accommodation. There is a huge shift going on in the local market in terms of the smaller landlords, and we are seeing a lot more approaches. I think 22% is the increase if we look at the last 12 months, that period 12 months ago. So I am, as part of the sort of savings proposal, and obviously getting properties in an open market to put people into as a temporary accommodation provision is very costly to the council, and it hits that general fund side of things. So it is at the moment my desire to increase that portfolio at the moment, to grow it, and then step it down as we no longer need it. Obviously, temporary accommodation in its nature is temporary. We very often end up housing residents, sometimes obviously discharged to duty into the private sector, but very often end up housing people, so they remain our residents. So I would always be advocating that we buy more, and or temporarily turn our stock into temporary accommodation to help with that demand and help that group of residents. So hopefully, it will be approved. I can acquire another 20 properties in next financial year, but again, it's part of the same conversation whether we can borrow to invest, and whether it's outright purchase, and that's our preference, or whether it's a lease. Lease becomes a financial. It's a finance lease, so it is still sort of shown on as borrowing anyway, even though it's not borrowing through the government particular kind of way. But it's I just need more homes, and I'm absolutely with you on that.
Councillor Edsel.
Thank you. Ryan, I'm assuming on page 44 that the 3 tower blocks that got the heat pumps, that's Chadwell, yeah? We're talking about, so that's over and done with now.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. We get Blackshots done, that'll up your strategy anyway, wouldn't it? They'll be all over and done with. what I will say is I wish you were selling yourself a little bit more out there, because using comms to sell, you know, the feedback we get from Chadwell, and I don't live anywhere near Chadwell, but, well, it's just sort of a bit away, but the feedback we get from that small site is wonderful. You know, everybody says how brilliant it is, and it's only 53 homes, but they've made a little community there, and it's so good. You know, why can't we do more of those? You know, I needed 3 of those in Blackshots, and we've made it. But I just want you to sell yourself a little bit more on comms and get some good feedback going out there, what you've done or what you're going to do and what could happen. You know, there needs to be a bit... People out there need to know what's actually happening, because you are doing a lot of good work out there, but it's not coming through to residents. So I just want you to, you know, get a bit more feedback out there.
Councillor Shinnick. Ryan, you mentioned about the government intervention that happened virtually after the strategy was published. I was reading an article the other day. I think Hastings is the most recent council that have said that they will 114 over homelessness unless they get some direct support. Going through the strategy, how much are we impacted by the national trend in the growth of homelessness, and how much is that putting the wider strategy at risk? Because reading through this, it basically sounds like the government intervention is stuff that you've been able to mitigate, and the rest of the strategy is kind of proceeding the way it was originally envisaged. A few tweaks here and there, but by and large, the strategy that's being deployed is the strategy that was originally planned. With what is appearing to be a national crisis with homelessness, where do you see the strategy? Do you think in 6 months' time you may need to start making considerable rewrites of the strategy?
So I think part of this point touches back on the point that Evelina made earlier on about the HRA being ring-fenced and the provision of homelessness services sitting within the general fund. So there is a differentiation there. So there is that element. We've taken some proactive steps. We were taking proactive steps to increase our supply of temporary accommodation within our own stock to help reduce the costs associated with expensive nightly let accommodation in the private rented sector. So we were looking ahead for this, and we've had a bit of a cushion for that reason. What I probably would say as a better answer is in the January committee, a colleague will be bringing the homelessness update for the year. And in February, we'll be bringing forward a paper to kick off the development of the new homelessness prevention and rough sleeping strategy. So we'll be undertaking a very, very detailed review of homelessness in the borough, looking ahead to what we think the key trends and the key areas of concern are going to be, and how we can respond to those appropriately. So rather than a rewrite and a revision of the housing strategy, we update, as we should do by law, update our homelessness strategy and put us on the right track to tackle that crisis as best as we can in the borough.
Thank you. If I can ask one more tiny question. The individual strands that you've pulled out in the strategy, I know you've labelled things like active travel and bits and pieces, and things that are kind of peripheral but integrated with a housing strategy. What about things like catering for modern ways of working, so ensuring that broadband and fibre optic capability are as upgraded as they need to be for some of the jobs that are now telecommuting based?
Thank you for asking that question. I'm just scrolling through the strategy at the moment. One of the things, at the time of writing this strategy, in late 2021, certainly engaging people, late 2021, early 2022, was people using their homes in a different way. People were needing to find spaces to work. I mean, the space to work, let alone the infrastructure to work, was a concern and a challenge. We absolutely identify within the housing strategy that people use their homes in a different way. So space standards and that type of consideration. Now, on broader, I guess, planning policy and expectations, it goes beyond what the housing strategy can achieve, but we can certainly influence, and we aim to influence planning policy in the local plan for Thurrock. But again, within our own homes, I've been in some of our new developments. I'm sure members around the room have also, and they are fantastic spaces. They are built to a really good standard and are examples of what people can do in Thurrock with the right intentions. So yeah, the strategy picks it up. We'll influence as much as we can, but we hold ourselves to a high standard with the properties we provide.
Yeah, that's great, and I applaud the strategy. If I would say just one thing, not just considering the individual space in the properties that we're building, it is things like the broadband that I would want to see us pushing other departments on, because I did have a wry smile when I was listening to a Southend councillor bragging about how successful they've been at blocking things like 5G masts and blocking applications from different broadband providers for digging up roads to install new cabling. And it did make one wonder, in a modern age of people working from home, you know, how is that actually impacting people who want to access those more modern ways of working? I think the strategy is fabulous, but it's not just the physicality of homes I'm interested in, it's the functionality that's not just space.
So if I can just come back in, and this kind of touches a little bit on the sheltered housing point. A recent piece of work that I'm aware of, I know a bit about, unfortunately I'm not the most informed of, across our sheltered housing complexes, we've had them all upgraded. We were able to access some funding to have, I think, super fast internet provided to all of those complexes. And that opens up a range of possibilities and opportunities and options. Again, people don't use sheltered housing the way sheltered housing was initially, and it isn't. Work is a consideration, but it's certainly not all about work now. If that's something you'd like to hear more about, then absolutely we can make sure the information comes back. But all of our complexes have been upgraded. So yeah, we are doing some of that work. It's not just our new stock either.
Councillor Judd?
Just a quickie, a would nice to have is some scooter facilities in the elderly complexes. I mean, it really does transform people's lives. I get so many requests, and I hear lots of sort of almost arguments between the tenants and the sheltered housing staff. Oh, you can't put it there, you can't put it there, but it really is so important for them.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I can tell you it's an active concern. It is an area of work that we are giving a great deal of consideration to. It's not just mobility scooters, but other types of sort of personal powered modes of transport, and in fairness, some of the risks that they pose, balanced against the benefits they provide. So we are tackling this as a piece of work broader than just housing, looking at the social care perspective and the legal perspective too. But it's an active piece of work, absolutely is.
That's right. So,
thanks. Yeah, just I hate to bring black shots in again, but it's James mentioned like working from home. Working from home is also causing a problem because their cars are at home more now, and we've got more. I picked up, Councillor Maney and I picked up with black shots, the places that may be built had no car parking spaces, and the people that are doing, all the work to go with it, they said, well, you can park on the road. And I said, well, have you been round there lately and had a look? No, it's full of cars, So if you're going to make more cars, it's not going to fit. So I think that strategy has got to be brought in as well, because people are bringing their lorries home, they're bringing their vans home, cars are staying home. So it's causing a big problem. So hopefully that will be pulled in, Ryan.
Councillor Judd? Sorry, Councillor Shinnick.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that, what Joyce has said. Also, it's a great concern that quite often I go out and you can't get along the street on the pavement because of all the cars, So I think we need to think on the lines of, we do need more car parking spaces so as people can access the footpaths.
Right, lacking any other comments? Everyone happy with the recommendations?
Yep.
Ryan, thank you very much. And it's your turn again. Social housing regulation.
It is.
Act.
as I'm back to back, if I could just ask for a moment while you bear with me, because this is as much a report that's been presented as well as a bit of a presentation that goes with it. So I'm just going to join the team's call to get that chucked up. So bear with me just for a moment. Thank you.
Whilst Ryan is doing it, obviously, as I mentioned in some of the other responses, this is a proper key moment for housing. A lot of new legislation, a lot of new regulation, a lot of new standards, a lot of new focus. We're going back to the periods where there used to be very proactive housing regulation, and since it was changed to more of a reactive co-regulation. We're going to be seeing regulator actually coming to inspect a landlord such as us. At the moment, it's every 4 years is the plan. So obviously, the regulator is, as we speak, trying to figure out their kind of itinerary and timescales. But we will receive an inspection within the next 4 years, starting from April. We're obviously making preparations for it. There has been already a pilot done on a few of landlords such as us, so local authority and landlords, and we're learning from that. Obviously, there is another regulator for building safety as well, which is a new regime for us.
We're having a couple of technical problems, so while they're fixing that, shall we quickly do the work plan, just to give them a couple of minutes breathing space? So, for January, Evelyn, I wonder, the homelessness update we've got with regards to mental health and social care, would it make sense to move that to the February meeting to be at the same meeting where Ryan's going to present on the homelessness strategy and rough sleeping? Is there any particular reason the homelessness update with mental health and social care has to be in January and can't wait for Ryan's report in February?
They can absolutely come together. I think we just split them because, as you remember, we've introduced an additional meeting in February because the January was getting too busy. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. Not a problem at all.
Do you want to have any other comments on the work plan? Obviously, the financial report that we've asked for. Councillor Ritzel?
Blackshots, James, you know, if it's going to go on to February, we've got to be careful that we're not going to go into March into Purda, and that's what I don't want to.
Yeah, but we have asked for a update on the finances.
Yeah, I think we need one before February.
Yeah, so we'll hear the financial report at January.
Okay, brilliant.
I don't think there's anything. Excuse me.
You're taking something for that, James.
Yeah, weapons grade off sweets.
Evelyn, did you say the garage report came out on the 20th of June? I couldn't find mine.
When they knock down the 3 blocks, would you like the nameplate sent round to your house?
Be nice, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't
Be lovely, wouldn't it? Oh, yeah. I'm going to be with a little thing that goes down.
I've suggested
it blows them up. You know, they're not going to get blown up, but they'll get taken down piece by piece. But just on that, if you look at Keir Hardie now, you can actually see the water running down.
Could you really?
It's actually running down the side now, water, because it's all in the cavities.
Between,
yeah, and it's not getting anywhere. It can't go anywhere.
The other councillors spoke want to reorientate themselves slightly. The presentation is behind you.
Yeah, it's behind. No, it's not. It's freezing in here.
No, but probably cold.
Oh, it's hate as it is. Eh? Put my coat on, I think.
Put a coat.
No, I put my coat on, I think, because I'm cold. I'm cold. Bloody cold. Warmer at home.
No, going on.
Oh, your microphone.
Sorry.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Sorry for the disruption there. I've supplied a report for this for you to take away and have a look, but just wanted to introduce the Social Housing Regulation Act, some other key areas of regulation that we are looking at within the housing sector, what it means for us and the the things we're going to have to react to. As housing overview and scrutiny, it's especially important for you to know this and learn with us as well as we adapt to a vastly improved and strengthened regulator. So, introduction and background. I'm also very happy to circulate these slides, and you can have them yourselves. So in late 2020, the government published its social housing white paper, the Charter for Social Housing Residents. This was, again, largely in response to the fire at Grenfell Tower and the way that residents in social housing felt that they were or weren't being treated by their landlords. So it set out 7 expectations that every social housing resident should be able to expect. For example, being safe in their home, knowing how the landlord's performing, and having complaints dealt with promptly and fairly. Following that...
the last one, how is that happening? To be supported taking your first steps into ownership?
It's from a personal, professional perspective, I've always found this an interesting one. It's odd to talk about social housing and talk about ownership at the same time. Hold that question, if that's okay, just for now. Thank you. So, moving forward into the plans that there was to strengthen the social housing regulator, it was decided that the regulator would be empowered to be proactive rather than reactive as it is now. It would require landlords to be transparent about their performance and decision-making. They'd be required to put things right when they go wrong, and they would be required to listen to tenants through effective engagement. That was the basis of strengthening the regulator. In June of last year, the Social Housing Regulation Bill was laid before Parliament, and in July of this year, Royal Assent was received. It really does aim to drive significant change in the behaviour of landlords, focusing on the needs of tenants and ensuring that landlords are held to account for performance. And this is something that you will see as a theme coming back and back and back to us. So, the Act has 3 core objectives. Firstly, and probably most critically for us, there is that new proactive consumer regulation regime with new statutory objectives and a serious detriment test removed, and we'll come on to that in a little while. There's an area to refine the existing economic regulatory regime of the regulator. This isn't something which the regulator has powers over for local authority housing. The only area the regulator does have authority and power is with rent setting, so the maximum increase which is permitted. Aside from that, housing associations do, the local authority housing don't include that. And then the final objective was strengthening the regulator's powers to be able to enforce new revised standards. Just on the subject of regulation and new regulators, not part of the social housing regulator, but certainly working alongside, and another thing we need to be aware of, is the building safety regulator, which will be sort of functioned by the Health and Safety Executive, looking at the safety and standards of all buildings, making sure that professionals in the environment industry are competent, and implementing a new regulatory framework for high-rise buildings. We've got a bit of clarity there on what that really means. Again, there is new reforms in the regulatory framework for high-rise buildings. Again, they're kind of all on the screen there. But also important will be registers of occupied high-rise buildings and building inspectors and building control approvers. Another key thing really to flag is that golden thread of building information. These are all factors which, as a landlord, we have to bear in mind and make sure that we keep up to date and accurate. And then in terms of the enforcement powers of the regulator, it's sort of highlighted there. But again, this is an evolving and a developing picture. Evelina.
And if I could just ask, there is a requirement to register every single of the tall buildings that Ryan mentioned, and the deadline was is passed. We registered all of our buildings in time. There's a special local arrangement with the fire safety service in Essex as well, which we did that as well.
Thank you. So, getting back to the regulator, I won't talk through every detail on these slides, but again, I'll circulate these. If you do have any questions, by all means, please feel free to reach out. So, the overall changes to the regulator were intended to bolster economic and consumer regulation, fostering safer, transparent and efficient housing provision. There's an expectation that an advisory panel will be set up by the regulator, including representatives from across the housing sector, with specific emphasis on tenant involvement. And again, this is something which is going to come back over and over. Evelina.
And I was just going to add that we're actually very lucky in Thurrock that our residents are very active in that sphere. So Sue, who is our tenant rep, who sadly can't be here today, is actually on one of those panels and working very closely with the regulator.
Thank you for that. Some other bits and pieces there: document and information collection that the regulator can ask for. They have an expanded authority to collect documents and information, and it is now an offence to knowingly and recklessly provide false information to the regulator. So again, these are serious consequences. It's not a small matter. The regulator is permitted to charge for unsuccessful applications, so that will be for new providers, but can also set fees to cover all costs. So there is that financial element to the change.
And just to add on that, a consultation recently closed in terms of fees for regulation, and they are set to double for landlords such as us going forward.
Thank you. The Housing Ombudsman, absolutely not part of the regulator, a separate entity entirely, but understandably working very, very closely together. The Social Housing Regulation Act enhanced the collaboration between the regulator and the Ombudsman. It requested and expected an updated memorandum of understanding between the Ombudsman and regulator. And there is an expectation of consultation and engagement between both the Ombudsman and the regulator when they're looking to amend either the Ombudsman updating its scheme or the regulator looking to introduce new regulations or strengthen or change the regulations in some way. So they really are going to be working very, very closely together whilst still being independent of one another. Registered providers of social housing. Again, some of this isn't quite so relevant to us, but again, worth flagging. Registration and deregistration of registered providers has been strengthened. In order to register, the regulator can consider compliance and want evidence before they're registered. The regulator has a far more simple legal basis to remove a registered provider from the register, such as where there is a serious breach of standards and the registered provider is unwilling or unable to rectify the situation. And these would be some of the most serious cases. Relevant for us, a health and safety compliance lead is a mandated role. That person is responsible, but that person is not personally liable. The ultimate responsibility still lies with the registered provider as the landlord. And there is also a point around electrical standards. The Secretary of State can enforce the electrical standards for rental properties to all registered providers, and they are consulting on further powers about what may or may not need to be tested from an electric perspective within a property. I think there was a suggestion about PAT testing appliances, for example. We haven't had the results back from that consultation as far as I'm aware. Now, moving on to some of the most relevant points, standards. So, one of the things which came out in the regulation, in the legislation, is around the professionalism of the housing sector. It's something which has been discussed many times across the sector as a whole. And the legislation sets an additional standard for competence and conduct of those who are managing social housing. The senior housing executives is the wording within the legislation, and they will require a foundation degree or level 5 qualification in a relevant housing matter. Senior housing managers will require level 4 qualification in housing management. Within the paper which was circulated, there are some examples of the types of titles that have been put forward, but it's may be open to interpretation a little. And I mentioned that we'd come back to the serious detriment test. Previously, the regulator needed to have reasonable grounds to suspect there was a breach of consumer standards that could or had caused serious detriment to tenants in order to intervene. That is now gone. The regulator can exercise its enforcement powers for any breach or suspected breach proactively. If they have reason to believe, enough reason to believe, then they can go and perform their tasks. There has also been recent consultation, which only closed in October, about revising the regulatory consumer standards. So although the economic standards don't apply to us, the consumer standards absolutely do. There were 4 draft standards issued, and it's anticipated, very, very, very strongly anticipated, that these will apply from April of next year. So the safety and quality standard, which replaces the existing home standard, the transparency, influence and accountability standard, which replaces the tenant involvement and empowerment standard, and then both the neighbourhood and community standard and tenancy standard exist and have been revised.
Just to say that we replied to that consultation and we broadly agreed with the proposal, and the overall kind of direction for others in the industry is that most of the providers are actually in agreement with what's included in those standards. So when our answer is most likely, it is sort of 99% likely that it will be the standard going forward.
Thank you. The other thing along these standards is the Act providing the regulator the power to issue a code of practice. Whilst not legally binding, would help RPs, registered providers such as us, to understand how we can achieve compliance. So it absolutely makes sense. We would want to kind of support these standards if it helps us meet our statutory duties, if it helps meet the regulator's expectations, and we're being provided a code of practice to help support us in that. Just to broadly go over what those standards cover in terms of themes. So safety and quality looks at stock quality, decency, health and safety, adaptations. Transparency, influence and accountability is very much about engagement with our residents, the information about our services, the response to complaints, treating residents with fairness and respect. Neighbourhood and community standard is about the local area, local cooperation, tackling domestic abuse. And then the tenancy standard looks at the tenures we offer, how we process mutual exchanges, how we support tenants to sustain their tenancies, and the way that we allocate and let our properties. There is a 5th standard in effect, which is tenant satisfaction measures. So the legislation allowed the regulator to direct housing providers, registered providers, to gather, process and publish data, introducing tenant satisfaction measures. The scheme started in April. From that point, I think everyone with 1,000 homes or more were required to start to record against these measures. The first data submission is going to be in summer of next year, and the first publication of national tenant satisfaction data will be published in autumn of next year. In the report, there was an appendix which was looking at some benchmarking activity that we participated in from our data from last year. That sort of sets out where in quartiles we ranked compared to other housing providers overall and other local authorities. It's worth taking that information with a pinch of salt because of the overall number of, and this is explained in the paper, of the overall number of providers who could provide data, the vast majority didn't. So that's something when the national ones are published and everyone is expected to and mandated to, will look vastly different, I think.
If I might, I think yesterday or the other day I sent you all a copy of that presentation from Housemark, which is sort of the next snapshot 6 months into this financial year where we're already having to collect that. Again, this is a subscription-only service, so not every provider subscribes to Housemark, and even if they do, not every provider provided their return for every question and all of that. So again, with a bit of pinch of salt, but we are absolutely looking at and analysing the data, and also with Chris working for me, he thrives on this. So you'll get an absolute sort of second one once we've done the analysis for ourselves.
Thank you. So looking at the sort of themes and measures, there are the 5 sort of core themes and an overarching overall satisfaction theme, and they're measured through either tenant perception surveys or things that are directly measured by landlords. So that example would be gas compliancy or water safety checks. Time taken to complete repairs is another one off the top of my head, and then the other ones are surveys and questions with our tenants. Nearly there. Monitoring and enforcement. So the regulator is far more proactive and is able to take more proactive steps to tackle failures by registered providers, implement plans for improvement, and use their strengthened enforcement powers. They can enforce expedited property condition surveys, reducing the notice period for entry to 48 hours. They can obtain a warrant, or a warrant can be obtained if entry is absolutely necessary. If there is emergency remedial action required, the regulator can authorise individuals to enter the premises for those purposes without a warrant, with at least 24-hour notice, and there would be penalties both for individuals and for organisations, for landlords, if entry is obstructed for emergency remedial action. The regulator can instruct performance improvement plans if standards aren't met, such as if there's non-compliance, a risk of non-compliance, a failure to follow directions, or any other way or reason to protect the interest of tenants. It's quite far-reaching. And then fines. Excuse me. Fines can be issued to all registered providers. The previous £5,000 cap has been removed entirely. We will have to wait and see what that looks like in the real world, and when the regulator starts using those enforcement powers. The regulator can also make managerial appointments to organisations, and again, these are in cases of serious failings and significant failings. And officers of registered providers can be removed or suspended if they obstruct or fail to cooperate with inquiry or regulatory functions. When I said at the start the regulator has been strengthened, it is significant, and it's something that we are taking very, very seriously. And that's all from me, but I think Evelina might want to say a little bit more.
If I may, Chair, I was only going to say that it's a difficult balancing act in social housing, and a lot of landlords out there have, and so have we, have got some, significant issues with stock that require significant investment. There has been a period of underinvestment, period of not not enough available funding. Some of the housing associations a few years back switched into building new homes as opposed to investing into existing stock, and again that's sort of problematic nowadays. I think my second point is that and the sort of the bigger landlords and the sort of consortia are making a very and the kind of bodies that we are all members of, such as, for example, Chartered Institute of Housing, are making very strong cases around the funding that is required. And as you might recall, probably about 20 years ago now, there was a Decent Homes funding available, and we are hoping as a sector that something similar will be available. There is just huge investment need in the stock. And I think lastly, there is an absolute appreciation that there are issues with the stock across the sector, and you will have noticed quite a number of landlords actually self-referring themselves to regulator in anticipation of this. We have done that test. We are not in disposition. It's in particular at the back of the sort of the very kind of core compliance matter, gas, electricity, all of that. So we are not in disposition, but it's a real risk, and it's very easy to actually tip across to that. So and I think quite a lot of sort of my colleagues or former mentors have actually made sort of life decisions about changing careers or retiring and things like that, because it's a completely different sort of world we are now operating in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for an incredibly comprehensive presentation, Ryan. Councillor Edsel?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, you need a degree for that. So it's, you know, you can't mitigate for everything. You've got it in, you know, mentioning black shots again, but you've got it in there with a load of electrical stuff and water don't mix together very well. And, you know, I pray to God that nothing happens in them flats before we get them down, because it is, you know, it is something, and you can't mitigate for all that, you know, because it's people you've actually got in there that plug everything into. We've got cycles being taken up there and plugged in, you know, so it's all that, you know, so I think you've got your work cut out with that, you know. Good for you, Ryan, if you've read it all and taken it all in, you know. Why did you ask me to stop on the bit that I asked about?
So the reason was because after that mention in the Charter of Social Housing Residents, it hasn't really resurfaced anywhere. It is the right to buy exists, and there is and always will be a drive into home ownership. You know, certainly for the foreseeable future. But Social Housing Regulation Act absolutely isn't the place for talking about home ownership. But yeah, it hasn't resurfaced anywhere I've seen yet.
In council homes, we tried to bring in with helping people to save the deposit to get out, and that never went anywhere either, did it? So, you know, it's trying to get people to try and take care of themselves, and it's very hard, isn't it?
Councillor Spate.
Is this likely to change the landscape on HMOs? Because sometimes you see things happen in that particular field of being landlords that you know that are quite worrying. I didn't know whether they come under this legislation or whether, I suppose if you've only got a house with 4 people in, maybe not. But there are a lot of people who've got some bigger ones now.
So this is looking primarily at well, it is looking at social housing. Properties in the private rental sector aren't included in this. Within our stock, we have a handful of properties which are HMOs and used for particular schemes supporting vulnerable people. We're the landlord; they would be featured within that. But broadly across the borough, if we're talking about HMOs that are in the private rental sector, then no, I don't believe they do fall under that regulation.
Ryan, Evelina mentioned some of the authorities that are self-declaring themselves the regulator. What have we done to establish relationships with the regulator? And one of the reasons I ask is, when I was portfolio holder for education, one of the things that annoyed me the most, and I had Rory do an awful lot of work on it, was we had so few in-person relationships with the Regional Schools Commissioner, and when problems cropped up, and on, I think it was 2 occasions, we had to self-declare for something, we did not have effective, warm, working relationships with individuals so we could actually navigate the system, not just to get ourselves out of difficulty, but also to try and learn from best practice and actually use the regulator to get us to where we needed to be. So what have we done to establish those personal bonds?
I'll take that if I may, Chair. So the staff that will be carrying out those functions it is growing at the moment. So there isn't necessarily yet an established group to reach out to. At the moment, it's more of a kind of generic approach to by locality to go to a particular person, and that person is known to us. We have expressed interest in, I'm just trying to remember, I think it's called Immersion Programme. So the regulator and DLAC officials immersing themselves within the service, sort of essentially shadowing us for a few days and figuring out what we do and how it's delivered. We have also expressed interest to take part into sort of digital research that the regulator is undertaking into the sort of social housing. We regularly attend, and I mean regularly, pretty much every single one of them, sessions with the regulator, with the chief exec and the deputy chief exec. They tour the country and do sessions. So we do that individually when they set up their own sessions. Local Government Association also facilitates those, as does Housemark, the sort of the source that we quoted. and the ARCH, which is the Association of Retained Council Housing Local Authorities. So wherever there is an opportunity to speak, to talk, to ask questions, or to sit and fear, I think, Chris and I definitely go, Ryan goes as well, and then we try and send others as well. But as soon as the more permanent stuff is in posts, there will hopefully be a bit of a structure chart almost released to the sector to say who your contact is. At the moment is too fluid, and they work just on localities. And I think lastly we have reached out to the organisation that went through the pilot inspection, Folkestone High Council, and we have also then been privy to the learning from the pilot across the 5 local authorities that had that. And those local authorities that had it were essentially either self-referring or the regulator was already interested in them. So the regulator kind of suggested that they become a pilot. It's one of those suggestions you can't say no to. So they became pilot local authorities. So we do it as much as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Judd.
How will the regulations affect us when we're dealing with, let's say, housing associations or other organisations that run estates on our behalf?
So we don't necessarily have that responsibility for that. So those local social landlords that run estates are subject to the same regulation. So they become the registered provider and are governed the way we are because we are a registered provider. There was a debate at some point whether there will be a role for councils, not councils as housing authorities, but councils overall, whether there will be some sort of intermediary, I can't pronounce this word, apologies, role to intervene, but that's not going to be the case. So is really just individual registered providers and then regulator, obviously the interplay with Housing Ombudsman and the other regulator that Ryan mentioned for building safety, but nothing for the councils.
Any other comments? Splendid. Well, thank you very much. Everyone content with the recommendations? Yeah. Wonderful. Well, we've already done the work plan, so close.
It's done on the work plan, so
yeah, go to spoke.
I know it's Sorry, I didn't put my microphone on as well, but I hope anybody picked up, that we need a report. I believe we need a report into the South Grays tower blocks.
I think that's a good place for it to go. Yeah.
It's a specific section on those towers.